going to start by doing a little bit of reminder about the things that you need to be, the etiquette of these kind of meetings. I know you're all getting more and more familiar with them, but I'll just read through it all now, and then I'll hand you over to the Mayor to start the meeting formally. I can see that the recording of this meeting has started, so can you please all be aware that recording has started, so anything that, if you're on camera, it will be visible to the public, and anything that you say, if you're not on mute, can be heard. So if everybody can remember that, I'll go into just remind you of some of these instructions. So first of all, the etiquette is that you will need to be muted throughout the meeting until you are asked to speak. If you are asked to speak, then you need to unmute yourself, speak, and then once you've spoken, you need to mute yourself again when you have finished. If you have a question, when we get to the question section, you need to press the little hand icon, which you can see currently is at the top of my screen. Sometimes it's in the middle, on a bar in the middle, but it's next to the icons that show you whether you're muted and whether your camera is on, so that there should be a little hand icon there, and you press that to raise that if you want to ask a question. And once you have spoken, you just click on it again to take that away. It's really important that you remember once you have spoken to click on it again to take it away, because otherwise it's quite difficult for us to keep track of everybody to know who wants to speak. You should only be raising the hand when the Mayor has asked you whether you have any comments, and then we'll try and call you in the order that you raise your hands. You'll need to bear with us. We may not always catch that in exactly the right order, but we will certainly try and get to everybody who has indicated they want to speak. If for any reason you have to leave the meeting, then you have to indicate by raising your hand again to say that you're going to leave. I know it's a bit awful having to raise your hand to say you need to leave the room, but we do need to record that because there has to be a record of when you've left the room. If you leave the room, or if you drop out because for some reason your connection is spoiled, we have to rely on you to decide whether or not you have heard the whole debate. You are not allowed to vote on an issue if you have not heard the whole debate. So we can't always monitor that. You will have to be responsible for yourselves in deciding whether you are or are not able to vote. When we come to the recommendations, you will be invited to vote. And I just want to flag up for everybody that we have changed the way we're going to do the voting. Simply that, we're going to do it the other way round. It's just about making it easier to count. So I will ask you firstly if there's anybody who wants to abstain. If there is, you press your hand icon, you raise your hand. Secondly, I will ask if anybody is voting against the motion. If you are, then you raise your hand on the screen now, because we did this last time when I said raise your hand and people physically raised their hand. I mean raise the hand by pressing the icon. And then lastly, I will ask you to press your hand icon to vote for the motion. The only reason for doing that is because we think that that is going to mean the fewer numbers will be dealt with in the first two sessions, and then when we get to the third one, those in favour, that's likely to be the bigger number, which is going to be the bit that's more difficult for everybody to count. So I know there may be some areas where that isn't going to apply, but that's the way we're going to try and do it. Now I can see that the other thing that's going on is that there's some use being made of the chat function. That's another way to get messages across. We know that Councillor Skinner was saying earlier that she was having some difficulty, so I think the Democratic Services are trying to help at the moment to see if we can sort that out. But as we are a public meeting and we are at the time when we need to start, I'm going to hand over to the Mayor and ask him to start the meeting. So, Mr. Mayor, would you like to start the meeting?
Good afternoon and welcome. I've got an echo.
You've got an echo because you can hear it on mine.
Oh, okay. Welcome to Middlesex County Borough Annual. Oh, wrong one.
Yes.
I got the wrong one on. Apologies for that. Good afternoon and welcome to the Tyrrell County Borough. What's this? Yeah, sorry about that. Good afternoon, welcome to the County Borough Council. Croeso I cyfarfod y cyngor at Llawen. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording will also be used for training purposes within the authority. Before we begin the agenda, can I please ask everyone to observe a minute silence for Helen Thomas, former local authority councillor, current Benidorm Community Council and community representative on the Authority Standards Committee, who sadly passed away. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Go on. Apologies for absence. Caris?
We have apologies from Councillor Ian Thomas and Councillor Julian Amos, and we also had an apology on the basis that Councillor Chris Barry was not sure if he could be here. So, Councillor Chris Barry, are you here? No. If Councillor Chris Barry is not here, then we're recording apologies from him as well, then, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We go now to declarations of interest. Members are reminded of personal responsibility to declare any personal or prejudiced interest respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of Local Government and Finance Act 92. Can you please note, A, members are reminded that they identify the item number and subject of the interest relates to and signify the nature, and B, where members withdraw from the meeting as a consequence of the closure of prejudicial interest and must notify the Mayor when they leave. Caris?
Yes. So, Mr. Mayor, I think we have Councillor Geraint Thomas was indicating to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Moderating Officer. I declare interest in item 7, the Cyfarthfa Foundation report, as I'm named as a nominee, as a trustee and board member.
Thank you. And there's also Councillor Lisa Mitten.
Thank you. Just declaring an interest in agenda item number 7 because I am up for nomination in participation of that board. So I shall refrain from the meeting and leave the meeting at that point, Moderating Officer.
Thank you. If I can just be clear to everybody that if you do have to leave the meeting once you have declared an interest, then what I would need you to do for that is to put your microphone on mute and also to turn off your camera. And then that will be the equivalent of you leaving the meeting, and we will then, through Democratic Services team, we will notify you how to come back. I'm just conscious that we're still getting chat messages that Councillor Skinner is not able to come in. I don't know if anybody's able to text her. I think it looks as though there isn't now a request for her from her to get in. So maybe she just needs to try and join again. Councillor Mills?
Monitoring officer, I can help there. She has just texted me to say that she was in, but she's been thrown out again and she can't get back in again. So if somebody from Democratic could help, that would be great. And I'll message her that now. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to proceed with item 3.
Thank you, guys. Presentation from Mr. James Brown, Managing Director of the Urbanist on the Merthyr Strategic Valley Hub Placemaking Plan 2035. Mr. Brown, could I invite you to address the council?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. If it's okay with you, I've been given a time slot of 15 minutes and then 5 minutes for a Q&A, so I can run through the work that I've been doing on behalf of the council over the last 18 months.
Yes, that's okay.
Right, I'm going to attempt to share screen. Please bear with me. I do hope that it works. Okay. It would appear that you can all see a main slide, and you can probably see some of the smaller slides to the left-hand side. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you just confirm that you can now only see a one slide?
I think at the moment we can still see the main slide, but also see all the slides down the side.
Okay. Let me just toggle something. Bear with me a second. That's fine. Okay. Is what I've got on screen at the moment legible to everybody?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It is now. That's much better.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, now I've got the IT sorted, I can then have the pleasure of running you through the work that I've been doing on your behalf over the last 18 months or so. What I'm going to go through is some very, very initial highlights of the work in process that we've gone through. The most important thing for you to consider as the full council today are the core ambitions and how they affect the master plan. And really, because a lot of the work was done before the public health crisis, what we've been able to do is just to make sure that the work that you now have is completely compliant with the changed circumstances that we're in. So summer 2019, the work that was undertaken was looking at the analysis of the existing conditions within the town centre. The basis of doing this piece of work was that what we wanted to make sure that you have is a very clear vision of what the future of Merthyr Tydfil Town Centre is going to be, and that vision needed to be something that was set for 15 years from now. The reason for that is that our recommendation is that you do need a long-term vision for the town, so that when you're doing things in the very short term, that they're all adding up to where it is that you want to be as a town. You will have short-term opportunities that are driven by funding, and you will have opportunities to make changes and adaptations to your town over the whole period of this process. But the key thing is that they all add up to something coherent. One of the difficulties is, as new funding opportunities and new development opportunities come forward, that everything can seem valid and interesting. But the key thing that you've got to do as decision makers is to make sure that every single decision about the future of Merthyr Tydfil is all amounting to a strategic plan that you can take forward, and that strategic plan is built out of some ambitions for the place that are consistent, and that is really, really important. What we want to make sure that you have is a very clear pipeline of interventions, and that all those interventions are all amounting to a coherent story and a coherent narrative. So what we needed to do is clearly understand your starting position. I've had the pleasure and the privilege to have worked in Merthyr before, so I do know the town very well, and I know how much successful work that you've done as an authority over a decade go. So really, we're starting on a position of building upon all the good work that you've done in the town over the last 10 or 15 years. But we did feel that it was necessary to readjust some of the ambitions so that you have the right projects. What we've done is we've compared the conditions that the town is currently in, and we were doing this obviously pre-COVID, and trying to give you a document that was really giving you the ability to make the best place possible within Merthyr Tydfil Town Centre. What we wanted to also do is make sure that you not only had a clear vision of where the town was going, but you had a delivery plan that was going to help you to get there, with a long list of interventions. As part of the process, because of the necessity for a lot of the projects that are likely to come out of this to be publicly funded, but also because of the major initiative that you already have in play around Cyfarthfa Heritage Park, we felt it absolutely essential to involve the Design Commission for Wales. So apologies for the acronym there. DCFW is Design Commission for Wales. So we've had engagement with them, which was useful and instructive and successful. So what we did last year, which seems faintly ironic now, is to basically say, well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to give you a vision for the future for your place, and we need to try and frame everything that we have done between last year and this year into the world as we would expect it to be in 2035, which obviously with the absence of a crystal ball is not particularly easy. But we looked at a number of sources, some of which are listed on the screen. And the basic sentiment that we were able to draw together was one of quickening change and sharp relationships between global factors having serious local consequences. And obviously we knew nothing about COVID and coronavirus when we wrote this slide last summer. So that what we've been thinking about in preparing a plan for your town is the relationships between what happens in Merthyr Tydfil and how that relates to what is happening more globally. One of the big quotes to have come out of this short piece of work at the beginning of this was this shifts in the traditional business models from KPMG. And obviously the fact that that you're having a full council meeting via the internet is testimony for that. So you will be relieved to know that we've been very much thinking about these shaping forces and how they relate to Merthyr as a town. And our mindset in approaching this work on your behalf was about trying to predict, but also then trying to get Merthyr fit for the future. We know that the town has got a wonderful history and a very proud past, and that it does have a legacy of challenges that we need to address. But we felt that we needed to, the best way of addressing that was to be respectful of the past and the challenges, but to try to give you the opportunity to reposition Merthyr to get ready for the future, whatever that might bring. So we think that by having these core ambitions, it enables you to do that. We undertook quite an extensive review of a key piece of policy documentation called the Grimsey Review, which is something that any authority looking at the health of their town centre should be cognizant of. And that was basically saying that those decision makers that are looking at the future health of their town centres should try and frame their thinking around some long-term key ambitions for the town. So the ones that we've developed for Merthyr Tydfil are as follows. Something that is absolutely unique, we think, to Merthyr Tydfil is around the opportunity to become this tourism capital of the Heads of the Valleys and the Brecon Beacons. The opportunities that you have both within the borough but also within adjacent boroughs about this centre for adventure tourism, but also the internationally renowned destination for industrial and political heritage. So this is based upon things that are happening now. I think one of the the important things about regeneration is that you have to have a story and you have to be capable of owning that story completely, and it needs to be yours, rather than trying to get a watered down version of something that somebody else can do. One of the things that you have, which is very unique to Merthyr, is this opportunity, and it is based upon good things that are already happening, and good things that are already being planned. So we think this is a strong basis, and were you to endorse this, then what this says is that it gives you the hook upon which other future projects can be delivered. The second element, which is something that is becoming universal, is the absolute necessity for everything that is done on a project basis, whether that be minor projects costing a couple of £1,000s or major interventions costing tens or even hundreds of thousands of pounds, is that everything needs to ensure that this low carbon town is there. I mean, obviously there's the Welsh Government targets for, I believe, 2050, but it is an imperative that everything we do is being targeted towards this in terms of low environmental impact and the adaptability of the town. Because the town centre is so well connected, and a very prominent theme in this piece of work was around connectivity and the role of the train station in the town centre and the role of the new bus station in the town centre, was the focus of the town centre for high quality public services, partly because the citizens of the borough require it as a necessity, but also because it does add considerable amounts of footfall. And we all know that we can't rely on retail as the sole driver of footfall in a town centre, bring in lots of other aspects. This is one aspect that you have some control over. The fourth aspect is a very, very important one. Again, it is something that is absolutely unique to Merthyr. You are already a waterside town. You don't need to become a waterside town because you already are one. But I think there are significant opportunities for Merthyr Tydfil to become a better waterside town. The image that is in the background of this demonstrates very well that you have already been doing that for the last decade, but there is more work that needs to be done. And that was one of the things that we identified in its work, is really squeezing every aspect of place value over the fact that you have a riverside and that people are naturally drawn towards water. One of the elements that is actually fairly ubiquitous, in that it's not necessarily unique to Merthyr, is the need to make sure that for towns to be fit for the future, so that whether that be a future of next year or in 15 years, that embedding digital fluency into everything you do is really, really important. And that is part of that is around what you do as a local authority, but also part of it is about what your community of businesses are able to do to make sure that they are reaping the benefits of being connected, and not necessarily so they're getting the upsides as well as some of the disruptive downsides from that. Part of that was about the application of data, and I think it's worth saying that my business and my team are composed of people that are experts in placemaking, architecture, town planning, landscape architecture. We know Merthyr well and we care very much about your town. But one of the things that we don't know quite so well is the details of how you as a local authority and your community of businesses move towards this very, very important step in this future of becoming a more digital fluent town centre. And we believe that that's a piece of work that you're going to need future support on from different consultants with these skill sets. But from everything that we've read and from all of the prep that we've done, we knew that this was important, so that we needed to put it in. The penultimate one is around an inclusive and engaging public realm. So by the public realm, which is a slightly jargony term, is effectively it's all of the spaces between all of the buildings. And one of the things is that it means that you have control of these spaces because invariably you tend to own most of them as a local authority. So a town with a very inviting public realm is something that you've done very, very well over the last 10 or 15 years with the way that you've reshaped your town centre. But there is more work to do. And part of that work is going to be around placing people at the heart of the decision-making process, particularly adjacent to the river, but also in an area we've called the Southern Gateway. And the image that's the kind of watermark behind this screen actually feels like it could be a CGI, but it's not. It's actually a photograph from a small town in Cheshire called Poynton. And we saw this image and thought, well, actually that could be the southern entrance into Merthyr town centre, whereby it's more of a considered approach to making sure that rather than just moving vehicles from one place to another, you're actually creating an environment where people really want to spend their time. And the whole placemaking thing is about creating places where people want to be. So the final core ambition that we think that you need to embrace as a council is about making sure that the town centre has a very wide variety of activities and a broad occupier. You are not alone in the process that you're going through at the moment. The whole of the Western Hemisphere is going through a period of de-retailing, and that comes with a certain degree of pain. It's possibly actually easier in a smaller settlement than in a very large settlement. You can see this process even if you were to walk down Queen Street in Cardiff, where there just aren't as much demand for retail space as there used to be. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that other land uses have a home in your town centre so that it continues to have a function of a place where people want to be. So in terms of the master plan, for the purposes of the fact that I know I've only got about another 3 or 4 minutes to go through this, to give you some of the highlights, what we've done is we've broken the town centre up into a series of sort of themed areas. So we've got the Northern Gateway, which is the area around the council building, the BT building, the law courts. We've got an area that we've called Merthyr Waterside, and part of that is actually going to become available because it's the site of the former bus station. The St Tidfil Centre is very, very important, but it's also a big challenge, and other city centres have dealt with the challenges of 1960s and 1970s inward-looking retail developments. And whilst there is some residential development within the St Tidfil Centre, it was composed almost entirely of being a retail development, which obviously presents some challenges for this 15-year future. So we need to be mindful of how you address some of those challenges and opportunity in the future. The pink area is a sort of east-west axis, which is the interchange corridor, where we've got you now have a direct relationship between a bus station and a train station, which is essential for future connectivity and active travel. And then we've got the Southern Gateway, which I've kind of just touched upon. So St Tidfil Shopping Centre and Southern Gateway is long-term change that is probably outside of the sphere of this 15-year time horizon. One of the things, the early observations on your town and your place is that by virtue of its fantastic history, it is very much a north-south town. It didn't ever really need to touch the River Taff because that's where you had things like tanneries, and you had old railway sidings, and you had things that were industrial of nature. So what you have now is you have a very long town centre that actually needs to become smaller and shorter in terms of its retail footprint. So one of the ideas is about how you connect the high street back to your riverside. And I think this photograph that I'll put on screen now is a very good example of thinking, because in effect, you have most of the space that is adjacent to one of the biggest environmental advantages that you have in the town centre has, over the last 40 years, 50 years, been given over to the private motor car, when in fact lots of other places would seize the opportunity to redirect their town centre to face the river. So this is a series of decisions that have been taken over a very long period of time. And whilst this piece of work has got a 15-year horizon, we do think that very gradually, slowly but surely, project by project, the town needs to turn around and face its river. This kind of thinking is being deployed in other locations in the UK and other locations in Wales. So, for instance, Swansea City Centre is gradually recalibrating itself so it faces its river, but it also faces the fact that it's got a beach as well. So this isn't, you won't be unique in undertaking this very long-term commitment to face the river. So gradually we want to be able to put life, activity, and we want to be able to put things that have an economic value adjacent to your river and not just vehicles, which we recognise is a long-term process. The other thing to touch upon is building upon the fantastic investment that you've made in the public realm in the town. That investment, say for instance Penderyn Square, you get to a certain point in Castle Street and the improvements are more about how you move vehicles and a little less about how you entice people to spend time in a place. So we would look to bring, we've recommended to your officers the fact that further public realm enhancements build on the really good work you've already done in order to reconnect the high street back to the river. So as I've previously mentioned, you know, the kind of, even though this does look incredibly similar to the area to the south of your town centre, it's these kind of improvements where you haven't just got road infrastructure in one place and pedestrianised streets in another, but the two are beginning to meet and beginning to blend in, so that the town begins to face outwards more rather than being more reliant on the historical makeup of Merthyr Tydfil being a very long linear north-south street. So I'm conscious of time. What I'm going to do now is just bring this back into focus, because the majority of the work that we did for your officers was done before the pandemic. So essentially what you have is you've got a piece of work that says very, very much about greening streets. It is very much about improving the spaces between the buildings. And it's about a very strong message about domestic tourism, about staycations and about activity breaks, which whilst they've been considerably disrupted by what we've experienced this year, we fully expect the demand for these things to rocket once we get to a degree of what our new normal looks like. This is exactly what happened after the last global recession, where in effect the word staycation became a thing as people sought to discover what was on their doorstep rather than jump on a long haul flight to the other side of the planet. This very strong emphasis on digital, the irony is not lost on me that you're having a full council meeting using a series of network laptops. So we kind of hit the nail on the head there, we think. I think that essentially you've got a 15-year plan, but this is now an essential part of your recovery plan. It's not just a town centre regeneration plan. It is now your recovery plan to your partners, whoever they may be. And we've cited Welsh Government here for obvious reasons, but there will be others. Quick wins. Even since we've written this, funds are available that weren't available when we wrote this piece of work, that are about public space, they are about active travel, and they are about greening. However, it's not all rose-tinted spectacles. We know that we are facing some severe challenges in terms of economic impact of post-furlough period. We know about some of the challenges in terms of the resilience of your own communities, even before the fresh set of problems that coronavirus has sort of unleashed on us, and the potential to sort of lose companies and lose institutions that were important to your future. So we know that the challenges are there, but we do think that by addressing the things that were in the placemaking plan for the town centre, that you can overcome some of those. I think sort of finally then, in terms of some of the further opportunities, you know, a renewed focus on homes and our neighbourhoods, and perhaps a change of focus away from the glitz and the glamour of a city centre. You know, the relationship between your town centre and you know, potential future regeneration, residential-led regeneration areas like Hoover. The relationship to Metro is very important, but perhaps the reduced need to actually travel, and by south I mean M4 corridor, you know, south of Pontypridd down to do local hubs and our local town centres now become more important? The reference to the race for space is, you know, what we're seeing nationally at the moment, of people wanting more space, so they will consider other locations to live and do business in ways that they may not have done before. So Merthyr can act as home. It can, by providing greater space than in other places. So we think that some of the ingredients are there. We aren't blind to the challenges that you face, but we are confident that you now have a set of tools at your disposal that you can use to help shape and reframe Merthyr for the next 15 years, and that this can really build upon the good work that you've done over the last decade. So hopefully that gives you at least a flavour of the work that your officers now have. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present this work to you this evening.
Members, any questions?
Councillor Kevin O'Neill.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Just first of all, I'd like to thank James for coming along tonight. I've had the pleasure of having this presentation before, and it continues to impress. Thank you, James. Also, I'm delighted that you've been able to share it with members here this morning. It may appear complex to begin with, but the sense and the structure about it is one that's certainly enthusing for me. I know that we've got COVID, but we've done very well during COVID in many ways, despite the awful deaths that we have. As a council, we've worked strongly together as elected members and officers to maintain our priorities, and I think this is a key priority. I know that Chris Long and Alan Owen are dedicated to the cause on this matter, and I'm convinced we'll get to where we need to be. So I look forward to seeing you again, and again, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions? Or any other comments? No, Chair. So on that basis, would you like to move on then to thank Mr. Brown and to move on to item 4?
Yeah, thank Mr. Brown for an excellent presentation. I don't think you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you are welcome to stay if you want to. So thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. If it's okay with you, I'll depart, and I just would like to say thank you very much for doing this work on your behalf, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
We will now move on to item 4, which is consider report of interim. Geraint Thomas, would you like to take this report, please?
Yes, it's a shame that James has left so quickly, because I wanted to thank him as well. I think he's done a great piece of work here, showing Merthyr's ambition and aspirations for the future. And I would like to thank our officers as well, you know, Zoe Thomas, Chris Long and Alan Owen. There's been a lot of work done here. I'm not going to go through the summary of the report because I think James did a great presentation on it. So I'm going to go straight to the recommendations in 2.1 and 2.2. That the content of the Merthyr Strategic Valley Hub Placemaking Plan 2019-2035 be approved. And in 2.2, the actions identified in Section 5 of the report be approved. I so move, Chair.
I second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, John. Can we move the vote on this, please?
You need to ask for any questions.
Oh, apologies. Any questions on this, please?
Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is on page 8, under paragraph 4.5, the 8th line down, where it says there, in the next, the heading is delivery of key projects in the next 15 years. And that line says revive the town's traditional townscape with specific focus on prominent listed buildings. And it gives example the YMCA, the Miners Hall and the synagogue. Progress is taking place with the YMCA because there's a planning application already submitted at the moment. The synagogue is being refurbished. Could I ask, what is the plan for the Miners Hall? And will this be the #1 priority in the next 15 years? Thank you.
Alan, Chris, do you want to take it or are you going to come in?
Yeah.
Chris Long's hands up.
Yeah, happy to take this question. I know Alan's just put his hand up as well. To be honest, all of our most important buildings are a priority for us. A lot of it rests down to engagement with owners. And as you know, the Miners Hall in particular has been quite challenging from an absent landlord perspective. We haven't given up on that. We're still trying to chase down. We now know who the owners are. We've known for a while. However, engaging with these landlords, you know, is not easy. So in short, in answering your question, yes, you know, it is one of our key buildings, and undoubtedly, I think we'll get round to tackling all of the buildings in due course. The other point to recognise as well is, I think between places like the synagogue, you know, the Theatre Royal, which we now starting to engage with the new owner on, the General Hospital, St Tidvilles, the YMCA, you know, believe it or not, you know, there isn't enough capital in the system from a Pan Wales perspective to tackle them all, right? So it is about making sure we line up our priorities really in terms of tackling them in due course. The other challenge as well equally is having sustainable uses for these buildings as well, right? So balance that against the landlord participating with us, and being on the same page in terms of the same vision, having the right amount of capital to bring these buildings back into use, together with a sustainable use, is always a challenge. So in short, the answer is yes, we will get around to them all. And, you know, Clive, you know, 15 years seems a long time, but, you know, I'm sure we'll gather in the end.
I don't know if the other hand I can see is Alan. Is Alan Owen, are you still indicating to speak?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Monitoring Officer. Yeah, just to echo what Chris says. All these buildings are absolutely critical to our regeneration programme, but the long-term nature of the redevelopment is a challenge. And what you'll probably see, and what you have seen, is when we can make progress, when funding is available, when there's a sustainable solution, then we target the building which best suits.
Are there any, I can see that Councillor Geraint-Thomas is indicating to speak. Are there any other questions before Councillor Thomas speaks?
I was just going to answer part of Clive's...
You were still answering, were you? I'm sorry, Councillor Thomas.
Yes, just to add to Chris and Alan as well, that the Miners Hall now is part of under the LDP for housing. So that possibly could be a future use for that area. As James Brown said earlier from the Urbanists, you know, we want to make Merthyr a residential placemaking town. So hopefully that could be a part of the strategic thinking.
So, Chair, there aren't any other questions. I don't know if you want to move on to comments.
Members, any comments?
Councillor Tony Rogers.
The mute off. Thank you, Mounted Officer and Mr. Mayor. I enjoyed the presentation, and also I know that Alan and his team and Geraint and them are working so hard to try and improve in Merthyr Tydfil. But what I'd like to see as well is underwriting all this, what we are doing, which is very, very important. I think a current of employment should be running through it all. I know we might create employment with tourism, but we must remember that a town or a city, wherever, or wherever you live, it vibrates on employment. Now, I think this, for the coming years or year, whatever it is, our top target should be employment. So whatever we do with this, we should look at angles. Is this going to create employment as well? Even though the thing should be done up, I give you 100% on that. But I want employment to give people an opportunity in this county borough for a pay packet at the end of the week. Never mind what Emily says when we're in terrible times, and I wish everybody the best, my heart leads through. But employment is the most important thing we can have in this county borough. So I would ask you, when we go through these, make sure that employment is looking to be part of it. If we only create 20 jobs. So that's my comment, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you, Mounted Officer. I just wanted to make a comment and almost reply to Councillor Rogers. Before this meeting, I had an urgent meeting with Vaughan Gethin, the Health Minister, about the ongoing issue in Prince Charles and the hospitals with COVID. And what I did say to him, I said, we've got a grip on COVID as far as data. We're getting accurate data. But for me, there are three elements of business. There's the disease. There's the impact on our social life, on how people live. And finally, there's business. I absolutely support what Councillor Rogers is saying. The dynamic, we must be generating employment, even with all this. And I'm confident that this plan will go through despite COVID. But I just want to support Councillor Rogers and the point he made there. And I raised it with the Minister this afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, there is only one more hand up, and that's Councillor Geraint Thomas, who will then close the debate.
Thank you, Mounted Officer. I just want to agree with Tony. Employment is so important, Tony. And I can almost guarantee you the way that the council are thinking at the moment with the Economic Recovery Board, the plan for that and the economic growth strategy, employment is definitely top of the list. So yeah, that's the way forward. Thank you, Tony.
Shall we take it to the vote then, please? There's no more comments.
Can I just say, before you actually vote, I want to remind you what I said at the start. So can I ask if anybody is going to abstain, can they show their hand first now, please? Okay, there are no abstentions. Is anybody going to vote against? Councillor Galsworthy voting against. And then can we vote all those voting in favour of the recommendations? Can't remember now. Yes, I think that. 28. 29. Yes, that's carried conclusively. Thank you. So if you now move on to item 5, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to minutes of previous meetings. Do we have a mover for this, please?
Mr. Mayor, it's the leader. Can I move the accuracy of the minutes on the agenda, items 5, to 5S. I so move.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I second that.
Mr. Mayor, oh, that's fine. I was going to say everybody needed to put their hands down, but everybody has now. So we'll start again, Mr. Mayor. If we can take it to the vote, can anybody who wishes to abstain please show now? Can anybody voting against please show now? Can all those voting in favour please show now?
Morning off. Is my hand coming up so that I'm voting because it's not coming up on my machine?
It's not coming up on your screen, is it?
No. Same thing happened last time.
Oh, I could see it. Yes, sorry. I can
right,
see
there.
you're on the screen, and yes, your vote is being
Okay, thank
recorded.
you.
And that, I think, is everybody. So that is carried unanimously. Can everybody now put their hands down? And Mr. Mayor, would you like to move on to item 6?
Thank you, Moderator. We're going to item 6 now. Agile and home working policy. And this is Councillor Andrew Barry to take this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, COVID-19 has thrown this authority and every other authority, business, charity, self-employed work and educational establishment into new ways of working. Ways of working that only sat in organisations as a theory and work in practice previously. And here we are 6 months later, having to face a new raft of working practices and challenges. National government said stay at home, go to work, stay at home. Regardless, here we are with a new reality of working practices. With the agile and home working policy being one of our first, but certainly not our last policies, trying to bring structure and focus to an area of work that finds nearly 30% of our workforce working from home, between 500 and 600 employees. I think this policy can be described as a work in progress because of the immediacy of the work in practice. Obviously, central to developing this policy is the ongoing collaborative work with the unions who've been invaluable, basically, in the contribution. And we look forward to continuing in that vein on areas such as childcare, health and safety, including ergonomic assessments, broadband connectivity, telecommunications, IT, hard and software solutions. And so the list goes on, basically. And that's why it's a work in progress. We will be back in the future to this council as this workforce develops and as the working practices develop. What is vitally important is our communication strategy internally with our staff and perhaps a greater focus now than ever before on that. The recommendation, Mr. Mayor, is a 2.1 that the agile and home working policy be approved. I move, Mr. Mayor.
I second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions?
Councillor Brent Carter.
Thanks, Caris. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. One question I got, please, Andrew. I'm not sure if you can answer it or you might have to pass it over. Can you tell me why, as a council, as an authority, that we're not paying for home workers' equipment if they need desks or chairs when other large corporate organisations, and I'll use where I work in the Department of Work and Pensions and HMRC, etc., pay for the home workers? I think we're perhaps penalising them. So perhaps can you tell me why we're not paying for them?
As I said, Brent, there's a long way to go with this. I know many staff have taken desks and chairs home from work. It is just one area of work that we need to develop. There are many, you know, and I don't know whether we've got any specific figures on that, Fran. But obviously there's a financial implication for all the things you mentioned there. But quite simply, we're down that road now and have to deal with those. If there are financial implications, we can't run this policy on goodwill. We have to step up to the mark. We have to provide what our workforce need. There are many practical issues we need to deal with, and some of them obviously being tables and chairs and ergonomic assessments and making sure they've got the hardware and software. As I said, this policy is a starting point. And I think as time goes on, it'll just get better, Brent. And I think we just need to bear that in mind. And there will be a financial burden, but we have to address that burden. One of many issues. There are soft issues and hard issues we've got to deal with. But I can guarantee you we're looking at every aspect of it.
On the basis, I don't know if, Fran, if you want to just say yes or no, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, nothing really. I think Councillor Barry has covered it all.
Thank you.
Caris, can I just come back in on that, please?
Yeah.
With regards to that, Andrew, I appreciate the answer, but it probably doesn't really answer your question why we're not actually, as a lead employer in the authority, why we're not actually doing this. We're expecting staff to be sitting on the tables or the kitchen chairs or sitting on their settees in the house, etc. Well, I'm sure the health and safety executive will perhaps have a dim view on that, because haven't we got any sort of duty with health and safety? Don't we have, don't employees in the authority have to sit in a health and safety assessment every year, Fran?
So yes, we undertake screen assessments, health and safety assessments with our employees. What we have said to employees as it stands at the moment is if they require their specialist chairs from the office, they can come and collect them. An assessment is currently undertaken with our estates department in relation to those staff that will be required to work from the office going forward or will be required to work from home going forward. And at that point in time then, managers have put their requests in, so we do know which staff do require additional equipment, and that can be considered then going forward once this policy has been adopted, hopefully.
So then I think the next person who was indicated to speak was Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you. First of all, I fully expected in the report, and the Cabinet member, Councillor Barry, has referred to the unions, but there's no reference in the report at all as to consultation with the trade union. And can I ask and confirm that consultation has taken place with all the appropriate trade unions, and as the reason why that wasn't referred to in the report? I've got 2 or 3 other questions after that, Mr. Mayor.
Shall I take that? We have consulted all the way through, Clive. And as I said initially, you know, their contribution has been invaluable. It's a huge task to get round to everybody individually to ensure that they've got every element that they need. I don't know whether, well, I have mentioned that we're going to be coming back with amendments to the policy. The policy is in place. I think we've got the bare bones of it in place. As I mentioned, there's a long way to go before it's anywhere near the finished article. I think we can look at absolutely reflecting what we're actually doing with the unions and putting that into the policy. It's a fair suggestion. And as I mentioned, we'll be coming back with amendments into the future on both the union involvement possibly and certainly with the other things that Councillor Carter has mentioned.
Thank you. My point was that the report should have stipulated that discussions had been completed with the trade unions. And hopefully that will be part and parcel of the reports in the future. Can I ask on page 93, it's the 3rd dot down, and that reads, individual applications of work from home can be made by employees via the council's flexible working policy, and all applications will be considered in line with this policy. And the last part of it says it is not an employee's right to work from home, which I understand. But shouldn't we have something somewhere in there, perhaps allied to that paragraph, that no council employee under any circumstances should be, in inverted commas, enforced to work from home?
Fran, do you want to
Yeah, the position as we currently stand with our employment contracts is that our employment contracts specifically state that we are to work from an office space within the County Borough Council. What we may find in the future is that our future employment contracts could be amended for new starters so that their office space then does become their home address, or we could enter into a period of consultation with the trade unions whereby our current employees have their contracts varied so that their office becomes their home address. So if it's a contractual requirement then that our employees work from home, we can actually force our employees to work from home at that point in time. We're not there yet as an authority. And it's whether the decisions will ever be taken to put us in that position. So, yes.
Can I just add something to that? There will always be a balance to be struck as to how we best make use of our workforce to ensure that they are doing their best for the local authority as against keeping them safe. And if we were to go into a more restricted environment again, and either Welsh Government or central government were to say that people have to work from home if it is at all possible, we may well be in a situation where that is what we would have to do. So that may be taken out of our hands to some extent, but what we're doing is trying to strike a balance where we achieve the most that we can for and from our staff.
Thank you. Obviously, if that ever comes to that stage, we need to have a proper discussion with their, if they have one, their trade union representative. Can I ask on page 97, under the heading, it's paragraph 12, homework and self-assessment checklist. And the last paragraph of that refers to line managers responsible for assessing work activities being undertaken by the employee to identify any potential risks, hazards that may exist. The Council reserves the right to prevent home working where it identifies potential risk hazards. To invoke that, wouldn't the line manager be required to visit to see the home situation in regards to, you know, where they work in, is it suitable, etc.?
Not necessarily. There is a large amount of technology available to us now, video calls, different things like that. Employees could send photographs in, so it's not necessarily that a home visit would be required. As Councillor Barry has noted, this policy is work in progress. There will be changes to it as a result of changing guidance coming from Welsh Government and central government. But as it stands at the moment, we didn't deem it necessary for our line managers to go out and actually visit our employees' properties in order to take those assessments.
Okay, thank you. And my last one is on page 98, bottom of the page, insurance. It refers there to home working may affect the home and contents insurance policies of the householder. Will there be some sort of agreement with the employee? And part of that, would it include the fact and pointed out that they really need to get in touch with their own insurance to be covered?
So what we propose to do is send out a number of communications to our staff and to our managers in relation to the implications for home working, of which then insurance and contacting your insurance company would form part of that communications to our staff.
Okay, thank you.
So are there any other questions? Councillor Andrew Barry, is this a question?
Just to wrap it up, if there's no other questions.
No, we haven't gone on to comments yet, Councillor Barry. So if you could, if you can wrap up when we get past comments.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, there aren't any other questions. Do you want to move on to comments?
Yeah, can we ask members any comments, please?
Councillor Darren Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Monitoring Officer. If I was to make an analogy of this situation, it would be putting the cart before the horse. The normal procedure is obviously get a policy and then deliver on that policy. But I totally understand that we're not in normal times. You know, it's totally unprecedented, and we had to to get to where we are very, very quickly. So I fully support this policy. I'm glad the trade unions have been involved. It is crucial for all the representations via the trade unions. But yeah, I mean, you know, we've got to where we are very, very quickly, and I fully support the report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll hand over to the monitoring officer. Any comments?
I can't see anyone else indicating to speak. So, Councillor Andrew Barry, if Councillor Andrew Barry speaks, that will close the debate.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. I welcome all of those comments. You can see what a complex issue it is. And as Darren has highlighted, we've been thrown down this road. It's happened extremely quickly. There are always going to be issues. I would welcome scrutiny picking this up and putting it through the scrutiny process, because as you can see from the questioning lines, there are many, many things that impact on this policy, and we will need to adjust it and we will need to bring it back. So just welcome scrutiny in future, you know, pulling it in and just going through it to ensure that we've covered all bases. Long way to go on a policy. Welcome all the questioning lines. Thank you, Monitoring Officer.
So there are no more comments. Chair, if you want to take it to the vote.
Can we please take the vote? I'll hand back to Monitoring Officer.
Yes, so can I ask you please, sorry, can everybody stop for a second, because just to remind you, I want you first of all to vote or indicate if you are going to abstain. There are no abstentions. Are there? Can I please ask you to indicate if you are voting against? There are no votes against. Can you please indicate if you are voting for the recommendation? Thank you. That's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Right, we'll go on to item number 7, the Cavartha Foundation. And I will hand it over to Councillor Andrew Barry to take.
And can I just interrupt before Councillor Barry starts speaking? Can I just make the point that 2 members have indicated an interest in this matter? So can you both please go on mute and turn off your cameras?
Monitor Officer, I believe Kevin's going to take this now. Kevin O'Neill, leader.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, leader.
Okay, thank you. This is the Cavartha Foundation report. A very short summary. At the Council's annual general meeting in September, Councillors accepted officers' recommendations that a new special purpose vehicle be established in order to deliver the Crucible project. The recommendations are that Councillor Geraint Thomas, Portfolio Lead, and Councillor Lisa Mitten be appointed as directors and trustees. I so move.
I second. Monitor Officer.
So, Mr. Mayor, any questions?
Can we have any questions, please, members?
Councillor Darren Roberts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Monitoring Officer. It's fair to say that we all buy into this project, and it's fair to say that the support shown for the Crucible project by the Labour group has been unequivocal from the start. Therefore, we think it's appropriate and acceptable for one of our Labour member from our group to be sitting on the board as a trustee and a director. So I'd like to make an amendment, if at all possible, Mr. Mayor, that Councillor Gareth Lewis is added to the board along with Councillor Geraint Thomas and Councillor Lisa Mitten. Thank you.
Then I'll need to intervene at that point and advise that you can't propose that amendment, because the articles that were approved in September allowed for there to be 2 council members on the Board of Trustees, and therefore you won't be able to propose an additional member. So I don't know if you want to consider whether you want to continue with a different form of amendment or whether you will be abandoning the amendment anyway.
Yes, thank you, Monitoring Officer. I didn't want to upset the apple cart. I just wanted to have one of our group members added on to the board, but as you have pointed out, that can't happen. So I'd like to move a further amendment then that Councillor Gareth Lewis is added onto the board, and that one of the other councillors, either Councillor Geraint-Thomas or Councillor Lisa Bitton, steps aside to do that. I think it's important, you know, that we are unified on this. We're always being reminded that we need to work together as a council. And I think from the point of openness and transparency, that needs to be the case. I'd like to reiterate that we are in total support of this Crucible project and this report, but we really feel strongly enough that we should have representation on the board. Thank you.
I second that.
Thank you. The difficulty that we're going to have, that is a valid amendment, and you can propose that amendment. The difficulty that we're going to have is in voting on that in that format. If that goes through, that will not give us then 2 members of the board. So we can either deal with it by dealing with that amendment now and then asking whether the independent group want to then decide who they put forward as the 1 member if that goes through, or you can deal with it by proposing who you suggest the 2 people who should be appointed is going to be. I think it's a matter for you, Councillor Roberts and Councillor Jones, whether you want to go forward. So just to be clear, either just propose that amendment, just deal with whether Councillor Gareth Lewis is or isn't supported, and then ask the independent group to consider which of the other representatives they wish to put through, or you propose 2 people to stand now. Can you just be clear which one you're going to?
Yes, certainly, Martin Officer. I think it's only right and proper that the independent group select their own. I don't think it's for myself or Councillor Jones to do that. So I'd like just to move the amendment that Councillor Gareth Lewis is added on as a representative to the trust, and I gladly leave the decision then about who the other representative is to the leader and his group.
I second that.
Thank you. And can I just then point out to Councillor Gareth Lewis, whilst it's always a matter for his personal decision, that the other people who have been nominated have declared an interest, and he may wish to consider his position with regard to declaring an interest at this point.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. At this point, I'd like to declare an interest.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, then we are dealing with the amendment. The amendment is that Councillor Gareth Lewis be appointed to the Board of Directors and Trustees. Do you wish to ask for any questions in regard to that?
Yeah, yes, members.
So,
any questions on the amendment?
Councillor Kevin O'Neill, is that a question? Sorry, you've taken your hand down again, have you?
Yeah, it was an observation.
Right. Are there any questions about the the amendment? No. Then, Mr. Mayor, if we move to any comments on the amendment.
Yeah, members, any comments?
So there we have Councillor Kevin O'Neill.
Just to add some clarity, Geraint Talman Davis is one of the key individuals on the Public Service Board. It was decided to have 2 elected members. The criteria was to have a gender balance, and clearly because we're the only group with females in our group, that's where Lisa came into play in that one. It's unfortunate that the Labour group did not have a female in their group, and clearly it would seem appropriate the portfolio lead and someone who's been as visible as Geraint-Thomas would be the other member. I mean, in this context, I do concur with the views that the Labour group, have been highly supportive of this from the beginning. There's no doubt about that. And as I've often said, it's one of the few things that we all agree on. I can guarantee regular updates, and I'm sure there'll be sufficient scrutiny to satisfy the opposition's needs. But I just wanted to make it clear why the position is as it is. Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tony Rogers, please.
can I say that I can understand the position that the Labour is coming from, and I also stand what the leader continues to say, but I think the most important thing we must discuss today is the subject of the Cyfarthfa. That got to start and go ahead. That's the most important thing, and I think at the recommendation, I have no argument about that, and I can see a lot of connection with people with the Cyfarthfa, Geraint and Lisa as well, and myself coming from Kevin Coyd. But I'm so keen for this to happen because the memories of Cyfarthfa Park and obviously the works were closed, but my great grandfather, my paternal side, was a roller, a top paid man there. The Freighting Gala, the park, and so many things happened there, being born and bred in Kevin Coyd. So I think that tonight, I think that we should get on with this, let it go forward, and take it forward on the recommendations tonight, and let's see some action there. Let's see some happening, because it's so crucial and so important for the future of Merthyr Tydfil. That is a gem waiting to happen. Thank you, Mandarin Officer, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So are there any other comments before we go to the vote? So, Mr. Mayor, there are no other comments. We need to go to the vote on the recommendation. So, members, just to be clear, you are voting on an amendment that Councillor Gareth Lewis be appointed as director and trustee, as one of the directors and trustees. So I'm going to ask you to vote, and I will do that in the same order that we've been doing all the way through so that there's no confusion. So on that amendment, would anybody who wishes to abstain please raise their hand? So there are no abstentions. Would anybody wishing to vote against the amendment please show? So there are 13 votes against. Would those, can everybody put their hands down now? Councillor Tovey, can you put your hand down, please? Thank you. And would those voting in favour of the amendment please show? Can I just be sure that everybody who wants to vote has voted?
Carys?
Yes.
It's not accepting my vote.
We did see you on the screen, Councillor Chaplin. It did, yes, it is recording your vote. It is recording your vote. That was why I was just asking Anne to count, because you seem to be showing us voting and then it goes away again. But we're counting that you have voted in favour of the amendment. So there are 11 votes in favour of the amendment, and therefore the amendment falls. So if everybody can put their hands down, we will now need to go back to see whether we will now go back to consider the recommendations that have been moved and seconded. The original recommendation, which was for the appointment of Councillor Geraint Thomas and Councillor Lisa Mitten. I think the first thing I need to say is that Councillor Gareth Lewis no longer needs to declare an interest. So if anybody wants to see if they can just let him know that he needs to come back in. He's come back in, there we are. So now, are there any questions on the original recommendations? No, there are no other questions, Mr. Mayor. Are there any comments on the recommendations? There are none. So, Mr. Mayor, we'll put that to the vote again. And we'll deal with it now. You are dealing with the substantive recommendations that Councillor Geraint Thomas and Councillor Lisa Mitten be appointed. Can I ask if there are any abstentions? Would you please show? If there are any votes against that recommendation, would you please show? So there are 11 votes against. If everybody could then put their hands down who has voted against. Councillor Goldsworthy, can you put your hand down, please? And all those in favour, please vote now. Yes, so that is carried and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, if you would like to move on to item 8.
We'll go on to item 8 now, the Gully Sucker business case. And I invite Councillor David Hughes to take this report.
Yeah, as promised in the last council meeting, I bring in this business case to the council, the Gully Sucker business case. The summary report is found in 1 to 1.3. Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council Highways manage the Gully Sucker cleansing service within the county borough. There are currently between 10,500 and 12,000 gullies within Merthyr Tydfil that require routine maintenance to ensure that the drainage system functions effectively. Other items of required regular cleansing are cattle grids, beanie blocks and acro drainage systems. The number of gullies increased every year due to the new housing developments being built and adopted. The gully cleansing service is currently provided by Caerphilly County Borough Council at a cost of approximately $58,000 per year. Elected members have requested that a business case be prepared, providing options for bringing the gully sucking service back in-house, and the business case attached is set out in Appendix 1, sets out not 4 but 5 options. Before I go to recommendations, I would like to agree in the comment that Councillor Roberts made last meeting, where he said we probably got this wrong, and I would agree with him that we probably did get it wrong. We should have listened maybe to Councillor Tony Rogers when he vehemently said that we were making the mistake, but there as a council sometimes we do get things wrong. But I'd like to go to the recommendations that the council consider the business case attached and option 3, the in-house gully service lease hire be approved. A further report be presented to the council detailing the full cost of the approved option. I therefore move.
I second, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, before you go any further, can I just check, and I should have done before we started this item, have Councillor Geraint Thomas and Councillor Lisa Mitten rejoined us?
Yes, Monitoring Officer.
Yes, back in. Thank you, Caris.
Thank you. Yes, so Mr. Mayor, if you want to move on to questions.
Members, any questions on this report?
So, Councillor Gareth Lewis.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the Cabinet Member responsible, Councillor David Hughes. Can you tell me how many days a month the gully sucker machine is currently operational in this local authority?
Not knowing the exact number, Gareth, but I know that it's not fully operational at every day. It's brought in when we called in, but it isn't operational every day.
Okay. Do we have an officer from the Highways Department here that maybe can answer that?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer? Darren's here.
Yes, please, Darren.
Yeah. It's in roughly 1 day a week. But again, that can change. It can come into 4 days in a month or whatever. It's all pre-planned, and it is the same service you currently have with Caerphilly as we previously had as an in-house service. As an in-house service previously, although the machine was paid for 52 weeks a year, we didn't have a budget and we didn't have the staff for that for the 52 weeks. So even when we had it in-house, it was around a third of the year that the machine was in operation.
Okay, thanks for that, Darren. So just to clarify, I think I heard you rightly. The current service that we have is more or less exactly the same as what was in operation prior to April 2018?
It's exactly the same, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So Councillor Declan Salmon, I think, indicated next. Councillor Salmon?
My apologies.
That's a legacy hand, right?
I believe if we go with the preferred option, there will be an estimated cost of £108,890 per annum for waste disposal. Are we going to look at, or have we priced already, the cost of doing this ourselves? As over the course of 10 years, this will cost the local authority over £1 million. I do understand that it's got to go through reeds and it's a special filtration system.
Yeah, the cost is so cheap with Caerphilly because they recycle the current waste. So the operation they are carrying out for us incurs no cost for waste disposal. By us bringing it back in-house, obviously there is a cost for waste disposal, and that's currently around £125 per tonne. Again, that's got to go to Bryn Peak Tip then for our recycling figures as well. And obviously, the more gullies we clean, the more waste we generate, and obviously there's a greater cost for disposal. So, yeah, are you okay with that?
Darren, doesn't it go through a reeds, like special reeds, which filters the mud?
Yeah, but the reed beds are Caerphilly County Borough Councils. They spent around £500,000 around 10 years ago now on the construction of the site. The construction of the site is down on the boundary with Gethley, Merthyr and Caerphilly there. So there is a spill tray where the waste is disposed in the water. And you're right, it goes through a reed bed facility. The water is cleansed, which they can reuse. So the machines fill up with clean water out of the reed beds. And then the waste then is dried off and used as a binding material for the top of playing fields and such.
Will we be looking at that to do it ourselves, getting a price on it?
What, to go to Caerphilly?
No, to have our own reed bed, which would save over £1 million.
Well, again, they would require an investment. They'd have to, you'd have to have somewhere to site the reed beds. I know there are reed beds down in Bedlinog, but there's a little bit more work involved than just tipping the waste at one end of the reed beds.
But we are going to look at this, are we?
I haven't proposed anything, but it is potentially something we can look at.
Okay, it's just it may save us over the course of 10 years. It may save us money. Just one other thing then. Also with the preferred option, I presume it takes 2 operatives to use the machine at all times. I'm just thinking about holidays, as I wouldn't have thought the 2 operatives would be expected to take their leave at the same time. So are we looking at training up other members of staff to cover holidays, or possibly bring in an apprenticeship, as it could be, I don't know, is it 28 days per holiday per employee? And that could be 56 lost days.
That is correct, and I think I've put it down as a risk. I don't think there's a cost actually built in on that, but I have discussed it with other members here, and I believe Highways is the smallest operational team within the council. and obviously by moving other staff into the gully machine, then even to cover all a day's potential sickness, it would put pressures on other parts of the service.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Darren.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you. On the front page of the covering report, it refers there that there's currently 10,500 to 12,000 gullies within Merthyr that require routine maintenance.
Yep.
I'm surprised, Darren, that haven't we got the data to indicate exactly how many gullies we've got? Because that's a hell of a difference between either 10,500 or 12,000. Is it right that we don't know exactly the actual number of gullies we got in the county borough?
The number we currently have is 10,500, but that's baseline data. So again, there are gullies that are added to the system by our own inspection teams. There are gullies that are actually taken away as well. So, you know, we got a bit of a guesstimate on that. And again, by fetching the gully machine in-house, I want to, if it's possible, to put an in-cab bit of software in there, so it'll data stamp when they've been cleansed, and obviously we'll be collecting all asset information as we cleanse the system as well.
Well, frankly, that obviously needs to be put in to, if we are going to have our in-house system, because we definitely need to know exactly how many gullies we've got, and presumably exactly where they all are. My other question relates to paragraph 3.3. The last part of that states the contract with Caerphilly CBC requires us to give 6 months notice of termination. And if you turn to page 110 of the actual business case and look at the bottom, the very last sentence there says legal interpretation will be termination of the current contract with neighbouring authority, financial penalties, which could be the remaining months of the contract, and also the 1 year termination notice period. So
yeah,
what is it? Is it either 6 months or 1 year?
It is 6 months. It is a typing error. It is, yeah, it's 6 months.
Right. And one last one, just to follow the question that Councillor Salmon made. There's a difference between the tonnage cost in Bryn Peak and down at the one at Getley Day. Is that correct?
Well, there is a difference, because Caerphilly a tip in free of charge because it's their own tip. So the £58,000 is just net income for them.
Right.
It costs them nothing to dispose of the waste.
But if we have a new in-house system, is there any possibility of a line of negotiation with Caerphilly to use that Getley Day, because it's so close to the County Borough boundary?
Well, it is close to the south. I can obviously have a discussion, and obviously if they're going to be losing £58,000, they would obviously look to offset that loss of money. So yeah, I can have the conversation. Yeah,
there could be quite a substantial saving year on year there then.
If they were interested, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Kevin Gibbs, please.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Thank you, Chair. Question for Darren. This is to start with. Roughly how I understand that the lead-in times for us to acquire our own gully sucker could take up to the region of 8 months. Is that correct?
Well, the 8 months is on the lower part, is 8 to 12 months actually. So yeah, that's just the build time on them. Yeah. And that's from when the order is actually placed.
And that's the lead time for a brand new gully sucker, yeah?
That's correct. Yeah, yeah.
What sort of timings? Because what I'm thinking at the moment, if this goes through tonight, and fingers crossed it will, but 8 to 12 months down the line, then the poor residents down the south of the valley are coming back into the rainy season again. You see by the weather, it's already started,
Yeah.
and no doubt we'll have a couple more storms come in. How quickly would we be able to get a second-hand vehicle and have everybody up and running with all the training? Bear in mind, I'm guessing that the training is going to be awkward at the moment because of the COVID restrictions. So roughly how quickly would we be able to get a second-hand one?
Yeah, I believe the training is only about a week, so there's nothing really intense for the training. But obviously I had to get some costings for the second-hand machine, and with Merthyr Motor Auctions and Newport, although they could give me an estimated cost on the second-hand machine, there were nothing, nothing available. I'm not saying if they didn't sort of shop around that something potentially wouldn't be out there, but again, second-hand machines, you're going to be looking at around 5 years old. They're going to be well used. It is specialist equipment on the machine. There's pressure gauges, it needs tank tests, there's a lot of hydraulics. Whether I would personally want to purchase a 5-year-old machine, I don't think it's somewhere where we actually want to be going,
Okay, I was thinking more the lines of the rainy season's coming back in for trying to get something up and running before they come in.
Yeah, you could hire something in short term, and that's the way I would go. If that's what you're looking to fetch it in from the 1st of April, you could hire something in short term. You could have the guys trained for that. There may be a little bit more cost, but you'd have an in-house service to go from the 1st of April.
Okay. Why are we looking at the 1st of April?
No, whatever. I'd just beginning the financial year.
Right.
We used to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. So the other three people now I have questions indicated for. So Councillor Kevin O'Neill, your question.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Is Carwyn there this evening? Or engineer, chief engineer?
Yes,
I believe so,
yes,
yeah.
I am.
Yeah. Hi, Karen. Just a couple of questions for you, if you bear with me.
Yeah.
The community are really energised in relation to the points made by others about the rainy season coming again and their fear of having to go through that dreadful flood again. The use of the gully sucker is something that they're also very concerned about and quite well cited on. But it's not just the gully sucker that is going to remedy their problems as far as any potential floods. Has the overall plan been communicated to the community, Carwyn?
Yes. So I've been in contact with the flood residence group in Troedrew, which obviously that was the village that was flooded the worst really throughout the borough. So yeah, I've been updating them continuously on the works that we do in there, even as recent as the day before yesterday, actually. So obviously they are asking questions, and obviously I'm answering those questions as best as possible.
Okay, just a couple more, if you would bear with me. Have also the local elected members have been consistently updated of your progress throughout this time from the date of report?
Yes, I believe so. Probably more so than the residents, because I was updating the ward councillors from probably March onwards in terms of our position and what we were planning. That was prior to obviously meeting with the residents group and obviously knowing who they were really. So yeah.
Okay, just one more if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. So in your view, there's been a consistency of the message coming across, and I understand, I know that the portfolio lead and yourself have been developing some documentation for the local group as well?
Yeah, so we've been working with corporate communications, and obviously they put a leaflet together now, which is going to be released to the public. So obviously, again, because Troedere was the worst affected, we have specifically highlighted that area. There is a paragraph within there specifically in relation to Troedere.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's my questions. Thank you, Carwyn.
Councillor Geraint-Thomas.
Thank you, Morning Officer. This question really is for Dave Hughes, really. Dave, I agree with Declan really in what he said about the cost of tipping the waste from the gullies. Is it possible we could do a bit of work on that one to see if it's worthwhile us developing our reed beds better so we can keep the waste in the borough and obviously save us a lot of money as well?
Yeah, there's no reason why we can't look into that. Yeah. Obviously, we got to look at all options. At the moment, we haven't got a reed bed, but we can look into that. The thing is, it's imperative that we get a gully sucker, I think, is the main option. What we're looking at the moment is to get a gully sucker to alleviate the worries of the residents, let's be honest. You know, you will know I was down there that week of the floods, and you could see people losing all their valuables they built up all their lives, and it wasn't a pleasant sight, as you can imagine. So, you know, to get a gully sucker is our first priority, and then to get a reed bed and to get it more efficient, that will be looked at, and we will be looking at that. Thank you.
I can see that Jude and Alan Owen have both indicated. I've got two more questions. So were you both going to help answer questions that have already been answered or asked? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to respond to Councillor Thomas. Yeah, just to say quickly, the second part of the recommendation on tonight's report is to bring a further report back with full costings. So in the meantime, before that, we can obviously look into those issues that have been raised in relation to the reed beds and the cost of actual disposal and bring that back to council next time.
Thanks, Jude. Alan, were you going to say something else as well?
Yeah, just for information, really, the only reed bed provision that we've got for filtration is currently in Taff Barguide in the park. That's within the ownership of the National Coal Board at the moment. So we'll take that up as well.
Councillor Dye-Jones.
Thank you, Morning Officer. Mr. Mayor. The floods around Storm Dennis happened many months ago now, though some residents are still putting their homes and lives back together. With this in mind, could the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services tell me when he or the department started looking at the Gully Sucker service? As in the report, the project titled Gully Cleansing on page 109 says the 8th of September 2020. If this was started, was there a reason for the delay for it not to be looked at until September?
I can say you've been looked at a lot before that, Dave. I don't know why they said 8th of September. We've been talking about this straight after the floods. I was down there with the floods. I was down there for the whole week. I seen the residents. I told them that we'd be looking at them. So, you know, that the gully sucker wouldn't stop the flood. Let's get that right now. It might have prevented some of the things that happened, but it wouldn't have stopped the floods. The floods happened for some other reason.
Can I just bring us back on track a minute? I think the answer to your question, Councillor Jones, is that is the date that project is started. It doesn't mean that nobody considered any of these issues before that. It just means that that's the date of this project being submitted. So the culmination of whatever discussions and considerations took place was that we then got to this project, which is dated that date.
Yeah, so, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that Storm Dennis was an exceptional weather event and that it would have been nigh on impossible to stop any flood in there. But I do have a follow-on question then from Councillor Hughes' response, which is, can you tell me why, if this has been discussed long before now, can you tell me why it hasn't gone to scrutiny before it's come into full council? as I believe we could have had a massive input on the final report.
I can't remember much scrutiny being held over the last 6 months, to be honest. You know, we only had one about 2 weeks ago. That was the first one for over 6 months, I believe.
Yeah, but this is quite a serious issue, certainly for the residents of Trodrew and the other areas. Personally, I would have thought it would have been on the priority area for it.
Well, I've been on the priority area because we called in the ward councillors and had the meeting in the council chamber where they came in and we discussed things.
I just think that had we taken it to scrutiny before it came to full council, that we would have had a better report for that.
Thank you. We're drifting into comments now. So there's still one last person indicating to ask a question. Oh, yeah. So Councillor Carter.
Thanks, Caris. Yes. It's not a question so much. I'm going to propose an amendment. I'm going to propose an amendment, Caris. Okay. And before I do that, it's nice to hear David Hughes' honesty in that we've made a mistake with what we did with the Gully Second Service. So I applaud you for that, David. Thank you very much. And it is imperative, David, I use your word, it is imperative that we get this service up and running as soon as possible. My mind, the 1st of April next year is nowhere near quick enough or good enough, and it doesn't provide a good enough customer service to the people who have been affected the most, and the people who've been affected the most were down the lower end of the valley. So with that in mind, and also in mind with the way the council has saved money, I've said they've saved X amount of £1 million from the budget over the last year. I propose the following amendments. Amendment 2.1 reads, Council lease hire a new gully sucker to bring the service back in-house. Be approved. 2. Sorry, was that 2 or 2.1? 2.2. Council also source and appoint a contractor with immediate effect. Be approved. And 2.3. A further report be presented to Council on the 4th of November to give a progress report to members and a full cost analysis be approved. Those 3 recommendations then will replace everything which is written in the report, Caris.
Okay, can I ask you to go back to second one? So I have 2.1 that Council hire a new gully sucker to bring the service back in-house with immediate effect. Second one, Council also, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, sorry, Caris, you're wrong. 2.1 reads as the following. Council lease hire a new gully sucker to bring the service back in-house be approved, which is basically option 3 of the old report.
Right.
Then 2.1, Council also source and appoint a contractor with immediate effect be approved. This report to members and a full cost analysis be approved. The importance of these members is a case of, and I go back to what Darren Chaffer said, it's going to be 8 to 12 months, possibly longer, to get in a lease hire one of these. If we're going to be, or you're going to be buying one of these built from new, Darren, I believe you said that. So we can't wait for that. Yeah. In my opinion, and you know I stand corrected, but we can't be waiting that long. And in my opinion, if we do, we'll be failing the residents once again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So is there a seconder to that amendment or those amendments?
Yes, I'll second, Monitoring Officer.
Sorry, there is a seconder. Councillor Roberts.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any questions on the amendments? Councillor Chris Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Monitoring Officer. I was just to ask Councillor Carter to give some clarity on what he means. He says about the second recommendation to appoint a contractor, but he doesn't say to appoint a contractor to do what?
Chris, I'm sure you'd be able to work that out yourself. You're appointing a contractor to come in and operate a gully sucker cleaning service until we actually get one in ourselves. I thought that would be self-explanatory.
I have to say, Councillor Carter, you need to say what you mean. So if that's what you want, you need to say.
That's what I mean then, Caris, yes.
Yeah, as per option 4 in the report, Monitoring Officer. So bringing a contractor as per option 4 to carry out the work on behalf of the local authority until we can get our own gully sucker come April, May next year.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer, and thank you for the clarity, Councillor Roberts.
Jude, are you going to come in to explain anything? Is that your show of hand?
Sorry, Caris, I was just going to ask for some clarification. If it's in addition, obviously we're currently in contract with Caerphilly, so if Councillor Carter is asking for in addition to that current contract.
Yes, Judith. Until we get our lease hire one in, yeah.
Okay. So are there any other questions on the amendment? Councillor Salmon. Councillor Salmon, are you on mute still?
I do apologise. I just want some clarification on what Councillor Carter is asking for. One, he wants a contractor to come in, and I'm sure you can't have a contractor month by month or week by week. And the price that in the business case is 280,000. So I'm just thinking, are you aware of the 280,000 that would cost extra on there? And also, you've asked for us to lease a gully sucker as well, and that's 115,000 on top of what we're paying Caerphilly. Is that what you mean?
No, Declan. What I mean is, and first I go back to your first point with regards to the 280,000 which you quoted for hiring in a contractor. I don't believe you can put a price on what the residents have been suffered and affected down there. So I think that's imperative. And I do believe we could probably negotiate, Jaron would probably know more than me, we could negotiate a contract between 6 and 12 months for hire contractor to come in. With regards to the lease hire of a new gully sucker, and Darren, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you get in one of those, you don't start paying for that until it's actually hired into you, and that's going to take 8 to 12 months. So, Councillor Salmon, I don't believe you're going to be paying for that until it's in service. I
just think, Councillor Carter, I completely agree that you can't put a price on residents. This safekeeping of their homes that you put everything into. It's just that I think rushing into spending what could be hundreds of thousands of pounds extra when we've got Welsh Government advisors in here looking at how we operate the council. I think you're right on the third option that you want to bring it back into in November, or maybe a special council in a week or 2 weeks' time. But I think before you can vote on these options, I think we need to know exactly how much it's going to cost. I think we owe it to 60,000 residents of Merthyr Tydfil, that we don't bankrupt ourselves.
Yeah, I need us to keep with the rules of debate, so we should be doing questions. I've got Councillor Andrew Barry. Are you asking a question?
Yes, a question, Caris, on the amendment. Councillor Carter says about to source a contractor, and I'm presuming that obviously that's in addition to Caerphilly. Is he talking from a position of knowledge then that he knows the capacity of our current contractor to increase our contract, or and the cost of that, or are we just saying he wants an additional contractor without knowing the capacity of the current contractor?
Well, Mr. Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, and I'm sure Darren is here, but I believe, and I'm under the understanding, that the initial contract with Caerphilly can't be increased from the 4 days a month, which is already is. Hence, having option, which was in the business case as option 4, of potentially hiring a contractor in.
Okay, so just clarity then, Caris, if I may, from Darren. Are we aware of the capacity to increase our current contract from Caerphilly, even if we give them a timescale to do that?
They could increase their capacity, but they wouldn't be able to do it full time.
But they can increase the capacity. So
yeah, but there wouldn't be much scope in their mind, I got to say. A couple of days extra a month, even an extra week, but the scope is very limited.
Okay, and what worries me about an amendment such as this is that the reason there's additional millions in the pot is because of prudent management of our accounts, and we plan for such eventualities. I don't think we plan for off-cuff amendments such as this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, still on questions, Councillor Clive Tivy. Councillor Tivy, are you on mute?
There we are. Sorry, do any of the other local authorities near us have spare capacity in the gully suckers?
No, before we went into contract with Caerphilly, we blanketed Bridgend, RCT, and again, I thought RCT may be interested because obviously we're sharing a depot. Caerphilly, Blaenau Gwent, and the only one that come back interested were Caerphilly. They currently got 3 machines on the road, and they sort of had a little bit of spare capacity, and they were looking to do some income generation, so they just seen it as an opportunity, but the others weren't interested.
Thanks.
Okay. If anything as well, yeah, can I finish?
Yes.
It's other authorities are doing much the same as us at the moment. They're investing and they take in extra machinery and manpower back in house anyway.
Sorry, Councillor Dye-Jones.
Thank you, Moderator Officer, Mr. Mayor. Would there be an opportunity for income generation really with either of the options that we've looked at?
There's always opportunity with it within the scope of work we carry out. When we did in-house last time, we undertook work for Merthyr Valley Homes. We undertook work for the Trunk Road. We wouldn't be able to do that now because we're not ISO accredited. And who else? Yeah, there's a couple of small businesses around Merthyr as well we used to do work for as well. So there is scope out there for, you know, some income to come in.
But at whatever level that is, it would offset any costs that we're discussing here.
Not major. The Trunk Road would have been the contract we wanted because that was you know, around £150,000 a year. But you know, there is scope for smaller work, shall we say? You know, £10,000-15,000. I would thought we'd get something in around that, like.
Okay, thank you, Darren.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Caris. Can you confirm, Darren, from the information we've already been given earlier on, because I wrote it down, you said that service varied between 1 day a week and 4 day a week. So am I right in saying that Caerphilly Council cannot provide us with a 5-day week service 52 weeks of the year?
That is correct, but that wasn't what we asked the service to be. We asked if they could clean the gullies on a biannual cleansing regime. So that is what they've provided us with. So although they may come in for a day or 4 days, it may be 1 machine, it may be 3 machines. So on certain days, you may see more than 1 machine operating within the borough. And that's where they get the capacity and the numbers in. And that's what we've asked them to do, is clean half our gully cleansing numbers per year. And that is actually what they are doing.
So just to follow that up, the reason that we only get them for certain time of the year, is that the reason why we got so many issues and so many blocked drains right from Pen y Wyn down to Treelewis?
No, again, as I pointed out earlier, the service is exactly the same as what we've always provided, is just in a slightly different way. As I say, even when it was in-house last time, we only used the machine a third of the 12 months, because that's what we had a budget for. So the service hasn't changed. And again, when the gully machine goes out, it's like an inspector, it will identify blockages. Last year it is identified about 5% of all gullies they cleansed. It identified 5% that were blocked. That's now sitting of about £500,000 worth of backlog work to investigate and to carry out. So the gully machine will provide you with something that will identify a problem. You also got to provide money to actually resolve that problem.
So just to clarify that if we go down this route of this vehicle, etc., because it does say in the report that we want to try and clean these gullies, not once every 2 years, but every year. That will happen.
Correct.
That will happen if this is approved. Is that right?
Yes, the resource will be there then to do that, yes. But it doesn't mean that every gully will work. That's the point. He'll cleanse them and he'll identify the blockages. The blockages then will sit in another work stream to hopefully get rectified and provide a solution. At the end of the day, that's also going to be backed up with a budget. We're very lucky this year, and we're very lucky for next year. Welsh Government have provided £600,000 this year and £500,000 next year to do highway drainage, and that is what we're currently doing. Now, after 2 years, as I say, there is already other work sitting in the tray which needs to be done, and that then needs capital funding to be resolved.
So that large amount of money, I understand that we do work on culverts, etc. Will that include?
No. Culverts is Carwyn, engineering, highway drainage from the gully to the invert of the combined system, which is Welsh Waters.
Right. So that large amount of money can cover us bringing up to speed with the block drains that we've got.
Yes, but you'll always have a backlog because of the way it works.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Carwyn, were you just going to help answer there?
Yeah, so just to mention, really, just to follow up what Darren said there, obviously the gully sucker will clean the gullies, but obviously if there's blockages within the highway drainage system, then obviously that's another issue completely. And it's probably worth mentioning at this point that in relation to Troedyreuw, Darren's team they've done a lot of investigation work in terms of the highway drainage systems there with camera surveys, and there are partial blockages and collapses on the combined sewers that belong to Welsh Water. So even though we could replace gully pots and clean gullies, but there's still an issue that's been identified with Welsh Water systems that obviously the gullies feed into. So we're actually in the process now of trying to arrange a meeting with Welsh Water because they can't really wash their hands of this. They are responsible for the combined sewers, and there is work that is required to those combined sewers to make sure that obviously any water is going to be able to flow through them. So I just wanted to make that point.
Councillor Mitten, did you have a question?
No, Monitoring Officer.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I don't think there are any other questions. Do you want to move on to comments?
Thank you, Caris. Yeah, members, can we any comments, please?
Councillor Mitten.
Yes, thank you, Monitoring Officer. There was a comment I wanted to make, and it's a comment direct to Councillor Carter with relation to his suggested amendments. First of all, just to remind Councillor Carter of the notice of motion that was brought by his party in September that asked for a business case. There is a sound business case brought to full council tonight. The notice of motion asked for it to come in November. It has been brought in October. And let's remind councillors that this is about a shared service with Caerphilly Borough Council, which will continue. The gully sucker is vitally important, but it was a mitigating factor in relation to Storm Dennis. And obviously it really is important for all of the residents. In relation to what Councillor Carter said, reminding us all about what Councillor David Hughes said, where he admittedly said that we made mistakes. Councillor Carter, you therefore also made a mistake because you voted for those efficiency savings. And let me remind you that when you had term of office, you stripped neighbourhood services and highways bare. You stripped them to the bone. So this is why we're sat here facing these issues now. And last but not least, let's not forget these residents. This is vitally important, okay? You're right in what you said, it's emotional. We must give them proper customer service. Councillor Carter, when I was down there with your exhausted colleague, holding people's hands, sat there while they were devastated, where were you? Thank you, Monitoring Officer.
Councillor Darren Roberts.
Carys, I need to reply to this, I think.
No, you've indicated you're going to speak, and when you do, you will close the debate, but I've got Councillor Darren Roberts indicating to speak before then.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. I've really got to say, when we put the notice of motion forward, or when Gareth, I should say, Brent and Harvey put the notice of motion forward on behalf of the Labour group, the rationale behind it was that it comes back to council in November, and there was a reason for that. We would have liked to have seen the detail of the business cases go before neighbourhood services scrutiny on the 2nd of November. There could have been a workshop. We've had plenty of councillor workshops. That could have come back to us. And let's be fair, we could have had a thorough debate on it and discussed it at the full council on the 25th of November. Now, I welcome tonight's report coming forward with all the detailed options. But let's be fair, the recommendations at 2.1 is to consider the business case. It doesn't say about implementing it here and now. And 2.2 says a further report presented to council with no date. So, you know, Councillor David Hughes said, you know, it was crucial that we get the gully sucker back in house. I concur with that, it is. But we need to do it sooner rather than later. And if we've got to wait 8 to 10 months for a leased vehicle, which, because of the specialised nature of that vehicle, is not totally unacceptable in my opinion. That's fine. That's one thing. But we need to address the issue of the gully suckers sooner, and by sooner I mean before the weather turns. Now, we've already addressed that Darren's team has been out checking and they've identified blockages. If Darren's team and the gully suckers weren't out identifying these blockages, they can't be addressed. So there's a bigger picture here. It's not just about clearing the gullies, it's about identifying further problems and trying to mitigate those problems. We all know that there's the storms and the flooding is not just down to the gullies, but they did contribute. There's no mistake about that. So, you know, the fact that the lead group has brought this report forward of the date of the notice of motion shows that they want to get it sorted. So let's get it sorted. Let's implement a service that is fit for purpose, because I don't see that the current level of service that we are getting is fit for purpose. Thank you.
So before Councillor Carter comes in, I have Councillor David Hughes. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what was said earlier. It's the same service we've had for years and years and years. So, Darren, maybe we should have brought the service back to full gully cleansing long time ago.
And I don't disagree with that, David.
Councillor Di Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Monitoring Officer. With regard to Councillor Mitten's comments to Councillor Carter about us supporting this cut, and we did, and Darren Roberts has highlighted our fault in doing that, and we openly admit it. But by the same token, when she complains about the previous administration cutting and making difficult decisions, which we had to do, I'd like to point out that there were very few occasions when Councillor Mitten voted against the proposals at that time.
Thank you. Councillor Brent Carter. You're on mute, Councillor Carter.
Sorry, Caris. Thanks. I'm a little bit aghast at Councillor Mitten, but I'm not surprised on trying to make a little bit of a show with this tonight, when it shouldn't be a show, it should be about the people. So I'm a bit disappointed in Lisa, truth be told. And I'm fully aware there is a sound business case. I just wanted to make it a firmer and perhaps better business case and better recommendations. I'm also fully aware in my responsibilities in the budget process. I'm also fully aware that I was part of the decision, like Councillor David Hughes, and I said to David Hughes, it was great to see that we had made a mistake. I hold my hand up. I made a mistake as well. And I'm also fully aware, Lisa, in the fact that you also voted with us when we were doing these things. So let's not play politics here, because it's not about it. And please don't try to belittle me in front of people when it's not worth it. And also, just to draw your attention to the fact, where was I when all these floods was happening? I tell you what I was. I was in bed for 3 weeks and off work with the coronavirus. So please, please get your facts and information before you start spouting off on full council tonight. Thank you, Kaz.
So that concludes the debate. We now need to vote on the amendment that's been proposed. So, Mr. Mayor, I will ask everybody to vote, and we'll do it the same way that we've done it all the way through. So, with regard to the amendment proposed by Councillor Carter, would anybody...
Can you just reiterate what the wording is of all those amendment elements, please?
So, we have amendment to the recommendation. The first amendment is that Council lease hire a new gully sucker to bring the service back in-house. The second one is Council also source and appoint a contractor to operate the gully sucker with immediate effect. And the third is that a further report be brought back to Council on the 4th of November to report progress and provide a cost analysis. So can I ask anybody who wishes to abstain in the vote for that amendment, please show now. Okay, can anybody who wishes to vote against that amendment, please show now. It's 40. And finally, can everybody put their hands down? Councillor Lee Davis, can you put your hand down? And Councillor John Thomas, can you put your hand down, please? Thank you. And can all those voting in favour of the amendment please show now? Okay, are you all done? So there are 14 votes against and 12 votes in favour, and therefore the amendment falls. We will now, I'm sorry, but what we're just saying is there are some people who I'm not sure how their vote registered. We will now move on to vote on the recommendation as contained in the report, which has been moved and seconded. And again, we'll do it this way. Councillor Galsworthy, can everybody put their hands down, please? Thank you. Anybody who wishes to abstain in the vote on the original recommendations as contained in the report. Any abstentions, please show now. There are none. Those voting against the recommendations as they currently stand, please show now. And those voting for the recommendations as they now stand, please show now. Thank you. And that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Caris. We move on to item number 9. Merthyr Tydfil Adult Community Learning Partnership, Future and Delivery of Welsh Government Funding. It's Councillor Lisa Mitten to take this report.
Just remembering to lower my hand, I do apologise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the summary of the report is providing an update on the challenges facing Merthyr Tydfil Adult Community Learning Partnership due to the restructuring of the National Adult Community Learning Grant. 1.2 is continuation of the partnership with the College Merthyr Tydfil has been agreed alongside the restructuring of provision across the authority to enable drawing down of the full ACL grant by the local authority and hence the management fee. In addition to this, there will be implications for partners that utilise the service area to process accredited outcomes, and a charge will have to be applied in future to cover these costs. It is a difficult one for us, but we are really, really grateful to have this partnership with the college in order to still deliver this service. The recommendations are that in 2.1, the delivery framework in Appendix B be approved. The financial implications are noted and increase in net budget to reflect the uncontrollable growth caused through grant changes by Welsh Government be approved, and a full cost recovery approach for supporting and processing accredited outcomes on behalf of partners and services be implemented. I therefore move.
We got a seconder, please.
Yeah. I second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, members. Any questions?
No, Mr. Mayor, there are no questions.
Can we move on to any comments, please?
Councillor Clive Tivy.
Oh, no, sorry, it was a mistake.
That was meant to happen, was it? Okay. Are there any other comments? No, Mr. Mayor.
Can we move on to the vote then, please? Right, Councillor Caris.
And again, we'll go through it in that same order. So if anybody wishes to abstain, please show now. Anybody voting against the recommendation, please show now. And those voting in favour of the recommendation, please show now. Has everybody voted? Thank you, that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Caris. We'll move on to items 10, 11, 12, 13, are just information reports. So, Caris?
Yeah, so there's nothing further to be debated on that, Mr. Mayor, and you can move on to item 14.
To item 14, to deal with any other urgent business or correspondence. I have none. There's no urgent business. Item 15, to receive communication received by His Worship the Mayor. There are no communications. And thank you. That was the last item on agenda. Meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.
Good night, all.
So leave it now.
No stop.